And it's funny because, and I tell people in my training, I'm going to teach you a framework to get you started. And they're like training wheels.
Yep.
With the idea being, if you follow the framework enough times, you'll stop having to think about the framework and you'll simply be focused on having a great conversation with those pieces.
GTMAI podcast with Jonathan Moss and Coach K. Tune in now, don't delay. Catch the future on display. In a world of
Good evening, good afternoon, everyone. It is I, Jonathan Carford, and this is the GTM AI podcast. And I am very pleased and welcome to have Mike Alton on with me. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic, Jonathan. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man, if anyone's listening to this via audio and not on the video, he has this phenomenal background I told him I was jealous of because I have to use my virtual thing because of my own lovely, rustic, unfinished basement office. And just compliments. I've seen your stuff. I watched a couple of your things in prep for this and get to know you and your style. And I have to tell you, you're like a good. It's going to sound really strange, and I don't mean it to sound strange, but I'm just going to tell you this. So I'm an audio guy, musician. So I love voices and that kind of thing. You have a phenomenal tone of voice and just to speak to. Like I think like a great audiobook or podcaster or like whatever. I just want to give you my compliments.
I definitely have the face for audio.
No, that's not what I meant at all. Not at all. No, not at all. I'm so excited to have you. You just told me before, you're the chief storyteller over Agorapulse, which is awesome. You do a ton of stuff in the AI marketing world, a lot of podcasts. I think you had 4 or 5, 6 podcasts, something like that, which is a lot of fun. And you told me how you live streamed before. But one thing that I wanted to point out was just some of your angles on marketing, which we're going to get into in a second when I start picking your brain on some things you've been talking about. But before we get all that, and I get onto the details of stuff, I like to get to know you better and have the audience kind of get to know you as just a human being. So you give us the non-professional LinkedIn resume version of who the heck is Mike and why are you in this world of podcasting AI stuff and what makes you excited about it?
So I have been in digital marketing for, 2 decades now. I've built websites, I've done social media stuff, content, and that sort of thing. Often because, honestly, I love working from home and I love working remotely and I like helping people digitally. And that's a really good area to be in when you want to do that kind of stuff. Yeah. And I've had a number of different jobs, but I've really appreciated being able to move around. I grew up in Ohio and then I moved to St. Louis, Missouri in 2007, started a family here. And I've been really blessed to be able to just simply work from home that entire time. For a while, I worked as a CMO. In charge of a web development company, kind of like a Wix or a Squarespace. Those were competitors to the company that I've worked for that nobody ever heard of. And then I've worked for Agorapulse since 2018. I've been their first brand evangelist and then head of strategic partnerships and now chief storyteller. But throughout all that time, I've maintained a blog talking about different aspects of digital marketing. It wasn't always focused on social media, although that was the start. During the pandemic, I pivoted into virtual events because I'd been doing virtual events since 2018. And then the pandemic said, okay, you know what? You're all going to do virtual events. And so friends of mine needed help. There were like a lot of in-person events that all of a sudden had to switch in 30 days or less to virtual. And they knew I had that experience came to me and I started leaning into that. I did fractional stuff for a while. But then a couple years ago, I started looking a lot closer at AI. I'm not going to say I was a front runner. I was not. I was definitely behind a lot of folks, but I was listening to someone, Paul Reitzer, talk about artificial intelligence and specifically the impact AI was going to have on marketers. And I realized 2 things. I realized, first of all, I was not up to speed on how AI was going to impact me personally. And then secondly, I knew none of my friends and colleagues in this space were up to speed on how it was going to impact them and their roles and their businesses. So I decided end of 2023, early 2024, you know what, this is going to be my new focus as my side thing. So starting on the social media hat, which again, that was my home base for everything. Started blogging, started my podcast, AI Marketing Unpacked in May of 2024. And at the end of 2024, I took a step back and I realized, you know what, I need to help more businesses because that's really where I saw a lot of struggle. Marketers tend to embrace technology really early, but so many businesses, particularly here in St. Louis, where I'm at today, they're struggling to understand what they're supposed to do. And that's and I talk about this a lot. Obviously, AI is a technology, as you and I know, but a
Yeah.
lot of business owners, they're thinking it's just a tool like Canva or something else
Mm.
like that. And they're not grasping what I'm supposed to do with this tool because
Yeah.
it's not a tool. It's a technology. It's more, how do I have an electricity strategy? No, use it to power other things. So I decided
Right.
I'm going to start a new business, the AI Hat. I'm going to rebrand the podcast, be a little more geared towards businesses, helping
Mhm.
businesses adapt and adopt. And
Mhm.
that's what I'm really focused on today.
Love it. Yeah, I was reading through your AI blog, and I do know you do training. I was going to ask you about that because I know on other posts you have a lot with obviously specifically AI for marketing. But just in the blog, I saw you did things on some automation. I know you've posted about some of the trends around agents, and then I read one of your. I have to go back and see one of your blogs, but the other one I found fascinating was just kind of like understanding just the sheer impact, and it was the mindset thing. Hang on, I'm going to go on your website and find it because it was this fascinating thing you put out about mindset. But what I love though is you're going to the place where you're taking people to the next level of it and you're a bridge. What I find fascinating about this whole AI training thing is that people like yourself who know the marketing world or know the business world or whatever the case might be. And I'm going to take a wild guess. You're not a coder. You're not one of those people. I'm not either. But you understand enough of the technology to bridge the gap between the two. So you become like this translator between
Yeah.
what was before versus what is now. As I'm looking for your blogs, I remember reading it this morning. I got up at 5 a.m. and I get up crazy early to do research and stuff. And I read it. And when you work with businesses, so first off, when you work with businesses, you work with like larger ones, local in St. Louis. What's your sweet bread and butter? What's your focus? What kind?
I'll answer, but I want to go back to something you were talking about a moment ago. Did you ever do that prompt that was going around social media a month or two ago where the suggestion was go to ChatGPT or Gemini, whatever LLM you're using, and tell it, say, hey, based on all our past interactions, tell me something about myself that I don't know.
Yes,
See
I did
that?
that.
Right.
Yeah, I did.
So I did that with both ChatGPT and then I did it more recently with Gemini because I've been really all in on
Mm.
Gemini recently.
Yeah.
And it identified this superpower that I have, which is exactly
Nice.
what you were talking about, to bridge that gap, to translate, to help people understand highly technical advanced topics in very simplistic ways.
Yeah.
And it's funny because you talked about being a coder. I actually am a coder. I
Oh,
went
nice.
to
There you go. I'm
college
not.
for computer science. I
Yeah.
used to build websites for the coders in the audience. I was a group of
Nice.
developers, so they know I'm a masochist.
I'm sorry.
Since
I
moved on to
assumed you're not a
WordPress.
coder. I'm so sorry. I still know that.
No, but that's okay. So that means I truly understand the highly technical stuff. When Jensen's on stage doing his keynote addresses and he's talking about chip design and the manufacturing, I get it. I'm not necessarily in that
That's
space
cool.
anymore, but I used
Yeah.
to sell NVIDIA chips and graphics units 3 or 4 decades
That's
ago
cool.
because I'm
Yeah.
old. So all that's to say, yeah, that is exactly what I do. That's the thing that I've always prided myself on being able to do. And
That's
this goes
cool.
back again before pre-AI, being able to help people understand complex topics in simple
Yeah.
ways. Today, I would say my focus is SMBs. That's who I'm helping
Cool.
for the most part. Part of that is by design. Those are the people that I think I can help the most. I am a solopreneur on the side with a side hustle. I work full-time for Agorapulse. I don't have the bandwidth to go into a major enterprise and assist
That's a
them.
lot.
They're looking for a McKinsey & Co. person.
Yeah.
But I can absolutely go into an SMB or mid-market business and do a workshop and help entire teams level up with AI.
Yeah. First off, again, I apologize for assuming you're not a coder.
Oh gosh, no.
I should have asked. My apologies. Because they're mostly marketers. Like there are some marketers, I will take that back, that do like website design and like coding from a UX point of view, but I've been like software technology coding, but maybe you can do that too. I don't know. But for me, I'm not like, but I understand it enough to know to talk to it, but I could never like code something from scratch by myself, me personally. And I think it takes, at least for me anyways, as I talk to people who are doing this similar thing, it takes a certain personality and skill set and awareness to be able to bridge that gap. So what do you think, or I should say, what are the concepts that when you work with business owners or people in general with the teams, what's the thing that when it clicks for them, they're like, oh, like what's that thing where you kind of explain in a way they understand that like this is game changing? What is that thing for you?
When it comes to AI, it's very specific examples or use cases that apply to them. And more specifically, that apply to their role, their profession, their job. It's one thing to show them how AI can write them a poem or a greeting card or something like that. That's nice. That's cute.
Right. Yeah.
But that's not going to move the needle for an individual who's literally worried for their job. They're
Yeah.
concerned that AI is going to take their job, or if nothing else, they just want to make sure that they're spending time on a tool or technology that's actually going to help them. So when you
Right.
sit down with somebody and talk to them about the kind of work that they do, and you're able to say, you know what, you were showing me how you were doing reports every single month and going back and forth with a couple different places and then generating
Right.
all this stuff. I see in there an opportunity for us to build for you a set of custom instructions or a custom AI where you can dump in a couple PDFs and have it create that report in moments for you and surface lots
Yeah.
of insights, that kind of thing. And I think one of the benefits that I bring is the fact that I have worked for so many businesses over the years, not just in marketing, so many things. My original business, the social media hat, the reason I called it the social media hat wasn't just because I
Right.
liked wearing hats, but because I came from
Right.
a lot of experience with SMBs where the owner or other people in the organization had to wear so many different hats inside the organization, and they were
Yeah.
struggling to do all these different things.
Yeah.
And so I can sit down with somebody in almost any department and have a conversation with them about what they do and understand enough to be able to identify the areas where AI can be a real asset to them today.
I think it's awesome. Personally, I love that kind of stuff. I historically have been in enablement, and I have that version of ahas in a different way for like sales and customer success teams and that kind of stuff. So I have the same thing, and I'm just geeking out on AI because of all the things you can show people. It's one of my selfish loves of AI is when I teach people like, what the fuck? They're like this.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, this one
let's,
thing we did at Agorapulse for
Yeah,
our
yeah.
sales team, talking about sales enablement, we identified this issue last year where the sales reps did not know where to find customer stories, quotes, testimonials. They didn't know where to find aspects of Agorapulse, what it can and cannot do. Because at a high level, Agorapulse is a social media management tool. Pretty straightforward, right? But
Right.
when you get down to brass tacks, when you're talking to people who actually want to use the tool, they're going to want to know things like, does it support sharing video to LinkedIn? Does it support posting a story to Instagram? What is the ratio of story image dimensions that it can share?
Whatever.
And those kinds of itty bitty things that most people would be challenged to remember. I've been using Agorapulse for 8 years, and I may not be able to tell you that kind of intimate detail. So they needed to be able to surface that. And other things like if we're talking to a government and they want to know our security protocols, where do I go to get that information? All these questions that they were going to Slack channels or they were going to
And
individuals
asking people,
or they're
right? Like, what's the answer to this
diving
thing?
into the abyss of our documentation, right? So
Trying to find it.
last year, we built a RAG, a retrieval augmented generation system, where it was connected to our blog, it was connected to our help center, and it was connected to our internal documentation system. And then we connected that to Slack. So now they go to a Slack channel and they ask whatever question they want to, and the answer is surfaced for them while they're on the call with that prospect, not hours later.
Yeah, that's cool. Use like an agent tech or some workflow automation? Like what's the connecting dots between everything behind the scenes?
We're using a platform called One Up, the number one UP. Increasingly, it's looking like we probably don't need to use them. They're great. They're fantastic. But our internal documentation system is Slight. And Slight is basically replicating a lot of this functionality native to their platform. So if we figure out how to plug in our help center and our blog content and that sort of thing into our internal documentation, Slight, and we could probably eliminate another tool there.
Yeah, that's cool. I know there's some tools I counted the tools I saw demos of last year was 314 or something like that. Crazy. And I try to get demos of tools that you can't see unless you have a demo. And I'm a glutton for punishment and I love AI. So I had all these demos and saw this tech. But there's a lot of cool tech coming in now where what I love about AI is understanding the context of what's going on. So like during the call, and we could go back and forth and if this is affected on, but the possibilities is cool. Like being on a call and then having what you're talking about on the call. And then as a result of the transcript, the AI pops up the result for you as they ask the question. That gets crazy. So it's not just, they have to go into Slack and manually do it, but it's automatically done real time. It's fascinating, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. I know you get into prompting a lot. I teach prompting at Brown University. I'm a geek and nerd and all that kind of stuff. I love seeing what people do with frameworks. I've seen a bunch laying around, but I saw the one you had was Rice, right?
Yeah.
R-I-R-I, or you say Rick, right? Rice, Richie?
What? I had the same
Yes.
question to a friend of mine, and we just agreed we're just going to call it rice.
Okay, good. Good. I love prompting frameworks. So I know we're going to switch gears a little bit, but tell me about it. First, I'd like to know, what was it about that framework you chose to make it that order? Because I'm always curious, what's the reasoning behind the pieces? So do me a favor, explain what Rice, R-I-C-C framework is, and then tell me why did you form it like that?
And now I got to look up what it is because I often forget. I know
Okay.
role, I know instructions and context. What is the second C is what I always forget.
Yeah,
Let's see.
look, constraints
look it
and then
up.
evaluation.
Okay, context constraints. That's right. Constraints. And it's funny because, and I tell people in my training, I'm going to teach you a framework to get you started. And they're like training wheels.
Yep.
With the idea being, if you follow the framework enough times, you'll stop having to think about the framework and you'll simply be focused on having a great conversation with the, those pieces will roll. That's the most important thing. Start by just helping the AI understand what it is you're expecting them to do and act like. And there's been a lot of studies about whether you say you are or you're going to act or whatever. But the whole point is that you give the AI that understanding, oh, okay, Jonathan needs me to be X because it's not going to activate any new information, but it's going to give it that little bit of a bubble, like a Venn diagram that says, oh, okay, out of everything that I could be talking about, I'm going to be an email marketing specialist today, or I'm going to be a business strategist or an HR person, whatever you needed. And then you give them the instructions, what it is that we're going to accomplish, all the other context that you want to give. And then you throw in some constraints if applicable. So you say, look, we're targeting only this audience with this campaign or whatever the other constraints might be. And then the final bit is the example where you are showing it if relevant. This is another one that says it's optional. I say always include it to start until you learn when it is optional and when it's not, because it's going to depend on the prompt. If you were doing, let's say, an email or a blog post, you want to make sure that it has examples of your writing style, examples of what kind of formats you like, and that sort of thing. So having that framework, make sure that the first time you do the prompt, it has all the information the AI is going to need, in theory, to do a great job in output. And it's going to save you the having to go back and forth with the AI because, oh, I forgot to tell you this, or, oh, that's not really what I wanted because I didn't tell you these other things. But the other thing that I always tell my students, because I do this with almost every prompt, is I also include at the end, take your time and ask me whatever questions you need to ask before we move on to the output. Because if you're doing it right, it will almost always ask you questions. A lot of times it'll give me this whole questionnaire of stuff, and maybe
that's the thing. Like, I love it, man. It's always interesting to hear the reasoning or thought behind it because I'm starting to. Okay, this is getting really prompt nerdy, but I'm seeing there's different ways to prompt. Like obviously with the O1 Pro model, I prompt that differently than I do the 4.0, or I prompt Gemini differently than I do the Claude, or I prompt Midjourney, obviously, an image generation different than something else, or I prompt even in ChatGPT 4.0 classic, whatever thing, I prompt differently based on the outcomes. I try to put them in categories, and I'm telling you this so I get your thoughts on it, but like I put them in categories like there's frameworks I have, they're more like conversational, so I don't know what the end goal is, but I know I need help strategizing, brainstorming, whatever. And the other one is like when I know exactly what I'm looking for and I need to get to as fast as possible, but I needed to adjust or mimic or change something. And I've also been noticing, like you said before, like the UR versus act as, I think there is a difference, but I think it's small. There are little tweaks you can do. Like I think there's big things that make a 20% difference. There's things that make a 2% difference. And like structure itself is like one of the big ways to have that. And then there's little things like I've been experimenting with like having, instead of having, I never used the word constraints. I always used the word rules. And I've been playing with laws instead of rules. And funny enough, like it behaves differently, which is crazy. So I know you can get really in depth with it, but the cool thing is with AI, and I'm going to really stop talking in a second, I promise, is that even for a user who like has very simple prompts, even having such a simple, I'm looking at examples right now of like the social media savvy prompt or the content repurposing prompt, having just a simple structure, even though the prompt's not that advanced, makes it so much better, which is crazy. Because when you do get to advanced stuff, you can get some really cool stuff, but it's not even required. So anyways, I'm saying this saying, what are the things you tell people to focus on that give them that 20% bump versus the small bumps, besides just structure? What do you think?
I definitely think that that point about taking your time and ask me
Mm-hmm.
questions, those things, like I said, I have to include that on almost every prompt,
Yeah.
every conversation, because it's a huge difference. What
Yeah.
people who are new to AI don't understand is that every large language model and most of the tools that you're using that are having AI built in that conversational way, they're
Mhm.
programmed to be helpful. They're not programmed to push back. Even though I
Yep.
may actually sometimes tell the AI to challenge me, it doesn't
Yeah.
ever challenge me, right? Which means if you tell the AI to write you a blog post, it will write you a blog post. You didn't even tell it what it was about. It will still write you a
Right.
blog post. And
Right.
so if you don't give it that space to ask you questions, it won't. It just won't ask you
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah.
And if you want it to do a good job, like any assistant that you might be working with in real life, a human being, right? If they're smart, if they're impassioned and interested in doing a great job, they're going to ask you questions. They're going to
Right.
say, okay, great. How long a blog post are you looking for? Who's our target audience? What's the tone of
Right.
voice? They're going to ask you things. What's the CTA? Those are all the
Mhm.
things that any good writer is going to want to know, even if they're ghostwriting for you. Things that you wouldn't necessarily put into that first prompt. You're going to tell it,
Yeah.
I want to create some content. We're talking to small business owners. The AI will push back and say, okay, great. SMBs is fantastic. Are there any specific industries that you're trying to talk to with that content? Because it knows if you give it that freedom, the more focused you can get with the content, the better off you're going to be. And that whole take your
Totally.
time thing, again, studies have shown if you tell it, it can take its time. It will actually think about, in the way that we think, what it is that it's trying to do for you, and it will give you a better result.
Yeah. There's a study that was done by a group in Abu Dhabi in January of 24 that talks about it. And they talked about 26 strategies of prompting. And one of them was,
Mm.
the statement was, take your time, take a deep breath, and go step by step, was the prompt. But like you, it's fascinating how adding those small little things make that
Yeah.
huge difference. I'm curious, when you've prompted, because I like to push AI as far as I can go, what have you done via prompting that you feel like you are pushing for a result that you're surprised you actually got? Does that make sense? So not just rewriting an email, but what's something like
Yeah.
that you really were, that you think was even, it could have even been hard that you spent a long time prompt engineering. I'm just curious, like what's the thing you pushed the most for that you like just love?
One thing I was going to add a moment ago that just
Please.
occurred to me, or should have added, was this idea of chain prompting,
Mm,
where you decide before you start talking to the AI what you want to accomplish and what some of the big chunked down steps might be. And then
yeah.
you walk the AI through those steps back and forth. So you start with the first
Hmm.
step and you have it do that, and then you move on to that. And content marketing is an easy example for that. Instead of going right to draft the blog post, start with what are some of the topics we should talk about in our business
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
reach
Get
our
some
target
context.
audience, go
Yeah.
back and forth on that, and then draft an outline and go back and forth on that, and then do subject line, make that a killer subject line, and then get into drafting of the actual content. So you do those step by step. Some people call that chain prompting, other people have different words for it, but that's
No, I
another
get it.
tactic from prompting that I think just totally elevates the results. But your question about what has really blown me away, I think what I have
Yeah.
just been absolutely stunned about sometimes is how creative AI can be when I give it the freedom to be that. Not to create an article about this topic. It's going to do that and it's going to do a
Right.
good job. That's what I would expect from something that has like the world's knowledge at its fingertips. But
Yeah.
when I say, hey, let's write a song about my podcast, and it comes up
Right.
with some freaking amazing lyrics based on just some facts or whatever. And then you plug that into a tool like Suno, and
Oh,
it
I
does
love
an
Suno.
amazing job of saying, yeah, okay, here's the lyrics. We're going to pair that with the blues or jazz style that I picked
Whatever.
and create a song that I like a lot. I went through a bunch of iterations with Suno. For those of you who haven't used it, Suno's a AI
Suno's
music
awesome.
generating tool. It's
Yeah.
so you can
So
give it
awesome.
lyrics or not. You can have it create lyrics for you, whatever you want to do. But I use Suno to create new intro music for my AI Hat podcast. And I love it.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if anybody else likes it, but I love it.
Yeah. You obviously won't hear this because you're won't hear the intros, but the intro music was generated by Suno, and the name, the chorus, is the name of the podcast of my co-host. Anyways, it's so much fun. I've been nerding out with Suno. In fact, mostly now when I listen to music when I'm doing work, whatever, it's my Suno playlist. It's not iTunes because it's the stuff that I created that I love. But to be fair, it's kind of like Midjourney. I've had to go through thousands of images to get to the 20 that I love, so I have to go through a ton of songs to get there. But the stuff that's there is, this is so good. It's
Right?
awesome.
Right?
It's so awesome.
Yeah,
Really cool.
yeah. Similar to
Yeah.
the podcast capability, the audio conversation capability inside
Yeah.
of Notebook LM. To feed
Crazy.
Notebook LM some documentation or some fun stuff, whatever. And
Yeah.
two people have such a realistic conversation about it. And it's all AI. It's all pretend.
So I have to tell you this. I do this thing with my students, and Brian, hopefully they're not listening to this, but on the second week of the class, I take this study from Abu Dhabi on the 26 strategies because it's part of their prompting stuff. And I have this link that I downloaded from Notebook, and I send them and I say, hey, this is a podcast I found about strategies and stuff. And I let them listen to it. And I always ask them, like, what do you think of the podcast? That's really cool. I never heard that one before. I'm like, yeah, it's all AI. And it just blows their mind. It's so awesome. I love it. Tell me, like, in your role now, I'm curious of I'm always interested in hearing what people are doing in not just one tool at a time, but like the ecosystem of AI that you use, like from Gemini, ChatGPT to whatever, Suno. What's your flow like, and what kind of outcomes are you pushing towards right now?
I'm still a content marketer at heart.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I love being able to do is use Gemini's deep research mode to give it a research topic and just let it just go loose. And it'll scan 25, 50, 100 different websites, compile a bunch of information, and create a really detailed report on whatever topic that I'm interested in. And if it's for content marketing, I can then export that as a PDF and then import that into a new conversation with Gemini using one of my gems. Those are the custom instructions inside Gemini, like a custom GPT. I've got those already set up that understand my tone of voice, my target audience, business goals, and everything. So I could say, hey, we're going to do a piece of content on Operator, which at the time of our recording, that's the new feature from ChatGPT, right? I used their competitor, Gemini, to do deep research and saying everything that anybody's ever talked about Operator as of now, how it works, and specifically we want to talk about how that relates to SMBs. Not, you can book a flight. That sounds cool, but that's not something for an SMB. How are we going to actually use that and apply the technology to an SMB? So we get that research done, and then I pull that into a new Gemini chat because Gemini can't do multiple gems or conversations. You got to start a new chat, which is annoying. But you start the new chat, you feed it that information, say, okay, cool. Now you know who I am. Let's turn that into a newsletter edition for this weekend and make sure my newsletter subscribers understand what Operator is, and then we can go back and forth and have that conversation. That's just one of the many ways that I'm pairing a couple different AI tools together to create really good, solid business outcomes.
That's awesome. Have you played with agents at all, or any type of Zapier and Make automations, that kind of stuff on the back end? Have you done any of that yet?
Just a little bit. And it's one of those scenarios where so much with AI, you almost have to know what you want to accomplish first. It's really hard to just wade into these entire oceans of opportunities and know where to begin, right? So I've got to identify some use cases and some problems. So one of the things that I'm looking to do is automate more of my podcast production. And one of the things that I'm doing at Agorapulse, in addition to all the podcasts, I do our customer success interviews, right? So we've got thousands of customers around the world. I'll get them on a call. I'll talk through what were they using before Agorapulse, what are their challenges, and so on. And the process today is I take that recording, pull it into script, get a transcript. I share that transcript to Gemini. In Gemini, I've got a gem that's been trained on Agorapulse's tone, voice, and audience, and also my preferred framework for success stories. So it understands how to craft the perfect success story. So it can take that 45-minute transcript and piece together the quotes, the details from the customer, who they are, what they did, what they went through. It's almost that hero's journey format. Technically, we use Tamsin Webster's approach, and then it creates for me a draft for the success story in English, which I then share with our content team. And here's where now I'm looking at coming up with a make.com automation where I want that gem to then send that draft, first translate it into French and German,
Mhm.
because we've tested that with my French and German teams, and they're happy with what Gemini can do when it comes to translations of
Cool.
text. We've tried like doing Hey Gen with the video, and that doesn't work for us yet. But they're happy enough with the written translation. I wanted to translate it into French and German and then use make.com to send it as a draft to our WordPress instances for those blogs, and then send a Slack notification or an Asana notification that says, hey, there's a new French and German draft in there. I've done the research. I know it can be done. I just haven't set it up yet. But that's the kind of thing that I'm working on doing right now.
That's cool. I'm doing the same thing because like there's these different layers. Like I just posted a video this morning about Operator and just what it's on an automation now to do. And this is the fascinating part that I think is what we're going to be seeing a lot more of this next year is like with Operator, you can log in. Like the example I gave was Operator's going to do some research for me and then log into my Slack and then leave messages in my group channel about updates around go-to-market AI. So I hooked it up, got all the credentials in it, and now it's just going through this automation and it's posting things for me as a result, which is crazy. Because before that, I'd have to get some sort of automation on the back end of Slack API, have some sort of AI doing the research and then structuring it and then hooking it through Make and then going through that thing. And now with Operator, I can do with one shop. And I don't think Operator is going to be able to do everything, but this world of agents and having more of an ecosystem and team-based stuff is fascinating. So I'm curious from you, like, what are the things you're seeing happening or coming down the pipe when it comes to agents that you either hope to see or you think that we will see as a result?
I think what I'm hoping for the most is to get help doing the kinds of processes that I just described.
Yeah.
I had to know that it would be possible for a tool like Zapier or Make to receive output from a large language model and then send it to Slack and WordPress or wherever else we want. And that still requires some work going into Make and setting up those different steps of that workflow. And I know very soon, really probably this year, a lot of that's going to become unnecessary, where you can just have a conversation with the AI.
Set up all the stuff.
And it will set all that up for you. And then it will say, okay, here, Mike, here's the workflows I've set up. Let's do a test. And I'll say, fantastic. And it will do a test. And I'll say, okay, we forgot a step here or whatever. It makes it so much easier and more conversational to get that kind of stuff done. That's what I'm looking for. And I guess this is what makes me really excited to work for SMBs, because the SMBs I've worked with in the past, just on like digital marketing projects, right?
Yeah.
Didn't have a lot of bandwidth because they're small businesses. They don't have budget. They don't have huge teams. They can't afford Marketo or Salesforce even in giant automation systems, but they're going to be able to afford these kinds of solutions. They can combine just a couple of basic AI tools with a couple of automation tools, and they're going to be able to create some really magical marketing campaigns and other kinds of business automation.
Yeah, that concept you're talking about, like, I think about all the work I've had to do in Make automations, and there's some complex things that I've done, but it's taken time to go through it all and make sure it works right. Taking the concept of doing that with AI, which I know is possible, is mind-blowing, because it's kind of like those concepts when you have a lawyer talk about how AI did a brief on whatever subject and it was fine and he saved $3,000 from someone paying it to do it. It's that concept on steroids, because like it's all these other connecting pieces. It's crazy. So let me ask one last question, and this will be the wrap up for this, but I'm curious, like, to me, part of this, how do I say this? I feel like the world you just described of making automations, connecting things, brings up a world we've never had before, and it opens up possibilities we've never had before. So how would you suggest to people to think from the mindset when it comes to all of this change? Like, how would you know where to sift out all the noise and focus and to be able to create and do things new? What do you say to people?
There's almost two people that we want to talk to. We want to talk to executives, business owners, and business leaders. And we want to talk to the individuals who are doing the day-to-day kind of work. And it's because it's two different conversations. The business owners and leaders, they need to take a step back and see where AI is going and make an effort to predict how that's going to impact their business and their workers over the next 12 to 24 months. You can't look much beyond that with AI, right? But you can fairly confidently look at where AI is going and how it's going to impact your business by the end of 2025 into early 2026 with agentic AI and that sort of thing. That's not that hard. That's not outside the realm of possibility, particularly for a business owner who doesn't have to go get certified from Cornell or anything like that. They can listen to podcasts like yours and mine and Paul Reitzer's and the Artificial Intelligence Show and have enough of an understanding of AI. Again, to your point, they don't have to be programmers. They just have to understand where the industry is going, where the potential lies, to see, okay, this is where I understand AI is going to impact my business and my productivity in a positive way, in a net positive way. They're going to make your people more productive. They're going to be able to save time. We're going to be able to eliminate complex automations. We're going to be able to eliminate a lot of redundant tasks and mundane tasks. That's cool.
Yeah.
What's important is that they start there, and then they think about, okay, if we do those things and everybody in the organization saves 18% of their time, what do we do next? What does that look like? How do they spend their remaining time? How does that impact payroll, new hiring, the rest of the company? Do we just work less? Do we work twice as hard? Or what happens next? They need to think that through. And then they can have that second conversation with the actual employees. They can sit down and say, okay, these are the ways that we are already identifying AI is going to help you in your role. It's going to save you some time. And with that time, we think you're going to be able to do X, Y, and Z. You're not going to be eliminated because we are already thinking about how else we can apply your genius in your role in other ways, because now you don't have to spend all that time doing reports or crafting ad copy or setting up A/B testing. Well, why test 2 ads when we can test 100 ads because the AI can create 100 different varieties instantly, whereas an individual human, we'd spend an hour trying to think of 2 different headlines to test and 2 different images to test. AI can do all that for us, right? And manage that. I don't have to do that. Cool. What can I do instead? That's where our business leaders need to be thinking about, because that's going to help them chart a path for success for their entire company. And as a leader, it's going to help set their minds at ease of the people that are supposedly being led.
Yeah, I would 1,000% agree with you, because whether it's larger companies or whether they're like small ones or like independent entrepreneurs, same question is being asked. I think that's the fun of it, is that everyone's in the same spot, just different size of orgs to deal with, which is fascinating. My man, it's been a pleasure having you. I love it. The website you have is theaihat.com. So I'll make sure I'll have it in the show notes. And then is it okay to have your LinkedIn profile as well? Is that okay to people reach out to you?
Absolutely. Yeah, cool. Folks, you can just go to theaihat.com/connect. That'll have my social profiles, LinkedIn, and others. If you want to be on a different social profile, I'm on all of them because I've been doing that for a long time.
It's all of them. Yeah.
Yeah, you'll find the podcast there. Everything you want to know about me is right there on that page.
Awesome. I'll make sure we link that. I'll get other shows, because I personally just like having all this stuff in one place to make it easy. But of course, you already have that, but I'll make sure I get the podcast and all the other stuff and load all the URLs. So, Mike, my man, thank you. You're the man, and appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man.
Thanks for listening to the GTM AI podcast. Please follow, subscribe, like, comment, and come back for more.